Let us pray. Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, you who are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, there are a lot of good streaming series out right now. Some new, some have been around for a while, and people just love going back and rewatching it. Shows like Andor, which season 2 drops this week, the first third of that. Severance just finished season 2. Young Sheldon, NCIS, The Last of Us. Season 2's coming out. The Office, The Bear, Grey's Anatomy, and there's so many good shows that people love to not just watch, but watch over and over again. And it's always important to know what happened just before the episode that you're going to watch. I often will remember the main points, but sometimes when you see the previously ons, it'll remind you of a couple insights. You're like, oh yeah, that's going to come up again today. So allow me to offer a previously on the Bible. God created the heavens and the earth. Humanity got evicted from paradise. There were floods and promises, kings and prophets, exiles and reunions. Then a baby was born in Bethlehem, and everything changed. Disciples were called, miracles performed, insightful teachings given, but eventually came betrayal and crucifixion with the surprise twist ending, resurrection. But that wasn't the end of the story. No, today you've joined us as we drop the series finale of the Bible on you, the book of Revelation, the last 2 chapters, chapters 21 and 22. It's Easter Sunday, and you probably came expecting to hear the story of the women coming to the tomb, finding it empty. There would be angels and the risen Christ, and to be honest, we'll reference that a little later in the message, but it is not our focus, because for the past month and a half, we've been doing a series entitled Learn from the Trees. And each week, our Bible passage centered around a tree or a group of trees. We began in the Garden of Eden with 2 very special trees, and today we're ending with the final tree on the very last chapter of the last book of the Bible, Revelation 22. Now, before we get into our passage for today, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the book or intro to the book of Revelation. This final book of the Bible is perhaps one of the most mysterious in all scriptures. And contrary to popular opinion, the book wasn't written like a mystery to be solved, like it's some coded fortune teller's scroll that you have to work to unlock. It's more like resistance literature for Christians under pressure. Revelation was written near the end of the 1st century CE, most likely during the brutal reign of Emperor Domitian. And the book is attributed to John, but scholars are not exactly sure which John that was. Probably not the gospel writer. Whoever he was exiled on the island of Patmos. He was a skilled pastoral prophet who wrote in vivid symbolic language, and his goal was to encourage 7 churches in Asia Minor to keep up their faithfulness amidst all of the persecution and threats that they were facing in their day. Revelation is not a crystal ball. It's more like a kaleidoscope. It reuses symbols from the Hebrew scriptures like beasts and horns and lampstands. You can all find those in various passages in the Old Testament. But it also turns the oppressive imagery that Rome used to talk about their power as a superpower, and it turns it on its head. In the end, the lamb wins, not the lion, or shall we say the dragon. Evil have its moments, but God gets the mic drop. So, let's get into it. Revelation 21, the first 2 verses. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Now, for want of a better term, this is the vision that John had for what heaven will be like. It's a new heaven and a new earth, which doesn't mean that God is wiping out everything that God created prior. No, I mean, God knows we haven't cared for this earth always the best way that we should have. But in John's vision, God is renewing the earth. taking the old and transforming it into what God intended it for it to be from the very beginning. Evil has been defeated and removed, and now God's full transformation can take place. Now, on this renewed earth, the holy city, New Jerusalem, comes down out of heaven. Now, many of you have probably heard of the book and movie series called Left Behind that talks about how Christians will get raptured and taken up to be with God in heaven at various moments in time. Well, that's not what John envisions in the book of Revelation. No, with John, heaven is lowered down and comes to earth, to this transformed world. Jerusalem, of course, was God's special holy city in the Hebrew Scriptures. It was the capital of Israel. It's where the temple was, where God dwelt on earth with God's people. But here in Revelation, it's a new Jerusalem. It's a new way in which God is going to dwell among the people. And what symbol does John use? A city. Biblical scholar Brian Blount, in his New Testament library commentary on Revelation, makes an interesting point. He says this: cities are inclusive, teeming, often dangerous and riotous places where resources can be stretched to the breaking point. And success, even indeed survival, comes only when citizens work interdependently. They negotiate strenuously and compromise sincerely. Knowing all this, John believes that the city represents the most appropriate heaven metaphor available to him. A city is humans in community, life together. It's not individualistic, it's communal. Being a Christian, being God's people, at least in the eyes of the book of Revelation, means being involved in the lives of others, being in relationship. And going to heaven in the book of Revelation means living in community with God and one another. Verses 3 and 4, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." John's vision of eternity is God coming to live with us. The phrase in Greek, to dwell with, literally means to pitch one's tent. To go camping, right? It's the Greek word that's used in the very beginning of the Gospel of John, which says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt, lived, pitched its tent among us." Just as Jesus came among us as God's Son, so it'll be that God comes to dwell with us for all eternity in this new Jerusalem. And nothing will separate the people from their God, not physical distance, not emotional anguish, not even physical pain. Nothing that robs life from being fulfilled and joyful and vibrant will be present in the New Jerusalem. Frank Rogers Jr., in his book, Compassion in Practice, tells the amazing true story of a Christian woman from Zimbabwe named Mwanda. He writes this: "Mwanda's eyes bore her weariness as much as her body did. She knelt in the back of the church in prayer, and her eyes stared at the floor. Mwanda was nearing 80 years old. During most of her adult life, she lived with the brutal dictatorship that held the poor hostage in Zimbabwe. She endured it all without protest. The withering farmlands, the pilfering of goods by thugs, the rumors of torture camps run by corrupt police squads. She survived compliantly until her husband and son were arrested in the middle of the night, driven away with hoods, and never to be seen again. In response, Mwanda organized a weekly vigil each Friday afternoon at the local police station. And beatings, tauntings, even public strip searches did not deter her. She mobilized whomever she could, if not to revolt, then at least to witness and to protest every Friday. Mwanda, along with 20 other women, came to church this particular Sunday morning straight from jail. She and the other women had been arrested at the previous Friday's vigil. The police kept them in jail for 2 days without food and released them only after her pastor intervened, promising to ask the women to suspend their vigils. Mwanda had earned her weariness. Both body and soul had been battered through months of resistance. In that moment, even if she didn't have strength enough to pray, she could at least kneel and rest. And then the music began. A mix of indigenous folk songs, Christian praise choruses, African civil rights anthems, and the congregation started clapping and swaying softly at first, but as is custom in Zimbabwean worship, the rhythm grew stronger, the clapping became whooping, and the swaying became dancing, and soon the music surrounded everyone within its reach, including Mwanda. And like healing oil seeping deeply into aching joints, it soothed, it restored, it emboldened the entire church. Mwanda rose, and lifted by the community spirit, she made her way up to the pulpit. And when the song ended, she spoke. When I was in jail, she said, one of the militia, in fact, a young boy from our community, asked me, "Why do you keep this up? You are old. You have no hope. We will beat you down again and again until you can't get up, and the vigils will eventually come to an end." Well, I'm telling you this morning what I told him. I do it because the power within me is stronger than the power in this world. The world's power, all it knows is violence, fear, and degradation. Its strength is only in its lies, that you are nobody. You can do nothing. You're just another body to be dumped on the heap of the forsaken and the forgotten. But I'm telling you, there is a power greater than the power in this world. It's the power of the one who sides with the victimized, the power of the one who says, "I hear the cries of the oppressed, and I will raise up the lowly. I will not let my children wail in pain alone." We're not nobody. We are children of God. We're not powerless. We can stand up for dignity and justice. We're not bodies just to be beaten and silenced. We will rise up out of the grave if necessary to witness against tyranny. They can kill our body, but they cannot kill our soul. They can beat our flesh, but they cannot defeat our spirit. They can harass us, berate us, intimidate us, but they cannot rob us of the truth. The power in us does not die. It's the power of life. It's the power of freedom. It's the power of God, and nobody can take that from us, she said. Nobody. 2 weeks later, after 2 more Fridays of vigils, Mwanda disappeared from her home in the middle of the night. By noon the next day, the vigil at the police station exceeded the capacity to jail all of the protesters. The protest sang on, and it still sings today. Friends, God created us to live lives of fullness, health, and peace, and unfortunately, we know that's not often how the world operates. As Mwanda's story testifies, and as we know all too well, the New Jerusalem, God's eternal community, will be a place where everything that robs the life, dignity, hope, and compassion in this world, that will be gone. That will be no more. And we as God's people, just like Mwanda, are called to testify to this truth. Following in Jesus' footsteps, we're invited to live lives that give others hope and dignity and life and compassion. It's what Jesus did. Ultimately, it got him killed, and yet God's power rose him from the grave, and that's why we're here on Easter to celebrate together this morning. Verse 5, "And the one who was seated on the throne said, 'See, I am making all things new.' And he said, 'Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true.' And then he said, 'It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. Those who conquer will inherit these things. I will be their God, and they will be my children.'" Biblical scholar M. Eugene Boring, in his interpretation commentary on Revelation, makes this powerful comment. He says, God doesn't make all new things. God makes all things new. And the Alpha and the Omega, those were the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. God was the beginning of everything. God will be the end of everything as well. And now God brings everything to its proper conclusion in eternity. Now, the end of this section, verse 7, is an adaptation from the Old Testament book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, where God says, "My dwelling place shall be with them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people." But John slightly changes his vision of eternity in Revelation, when he says, those who conquer will inherit these things, and I will be their God, and they will be my peoples. Ezekiel was talking about the Hebrew people, God's chosen ones. John's vision is radically inclusive, that includes everyone. Verse 8, but as for the cowardly, the faithless, the polluted, the murderers, the fornicators, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Dr. Boring comments that the characteristics listed here by John are very specific. They were many of the qualities that the tyrannical Roman government under the emperors emphasized and perpetuated in the first century. They were the reality that those early Christians were forced to live among, as Roman society literally worshiped the emperor as God and his reign of power. Boring writes, John does not say, however, that anyone who's ever been guilty of these failings is prohibited from participating in the holy city, only that no one will bring these sinful practices with him or her into the holy city. Now, the rest of chapter 21 is a description of what this New Jerusalem may look like. And remember, John is not giving us John is giving us an artistic representation, because our minds are very limited, our human capacity of understanding what eternity will be like. In fact, most contemporary scholars do not believe that it's meant to be a literal representation of what heaven will be. But what's most important is this understanding of we'll be spending eternity in the presence of God and one another, God whose love for the world is incomprehensible. Nevertheless, it's what we got, so let's talk a little bit about what we see at the end of chapter 21. God's glory radiates from the city. There's a great high wall that runs around this New Jerusalem. The wall has 12 gates with 12 angels, and the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel is on each of the different gates. Then the 12 apostles, or Jesus' 12 disciples, they have their names inscribed on each of the 12 foundations that are holding up the wall. And remember, in the Bible, numbers often mean more than simply what the number means itself. In this case, 12 represents completeness, authority, and divine governance. And then an angel comes and helps John measure the city, and it's shaped like a giant, and I mean giant, square. We're told that it's 12,000 stadia in length, width, and height. Now, the New Revised Standard Version that we have in our pews, that Bible says 1,500 miles each. That's mathematically correct, but it obscures the symbolism of the 12 that we've seen again, right? 12,000 in the city's measurement. But just so you know, 1,500 miles is roughly the equivalent the distance from New York City to Denver, Colorado. And then the same width, and then the same height. I'm telling you, this is a huge city. Symbolically, the 12 by 12 by 12 means completeness. John knew that it would be big enough for everyone. The city's 12 gates are perpetually open. Everyone can enter freely. We need walls and fences here to protect ourselves from those that might want to do us harm. But in the New Jerusalem, God has conquered evil once and for all. There are no threats anymore whatsoever. And so we're also told that along with the gates being perpetually open, there's no need for sun or the light of the moon to light up the city, for God's glory shines brightly forever and ever. And there's one more interesting description about the city at the end of chapter 21. There's no temple. There's no place to go to worship God. The temple, of course, was where Hebrews believed that the presence of God dwelt on earth. In fact, it was in the very back part of the temple called the Holy of Holies. But here in the New Jerusalem, the whole city is holy. In fact, God is not relegated to some designated holy space. God's presence is everywhere. And then, finally, as we flip over to chapter 22, we get to meet our tree for the week in the first two verses. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. So our tree is the tree of life. It flanks both sides of the crystal river that flows from the throne of God. And I guess it's the original fruit of the month club, because every month a different fruit is coming out on this tree. But what's important about it is what the fruit or the leaves do. Now, go back to the book of Ezekiel, where we referenced earlier. In chapter 47, Ezekiel talks about a tree that leaves is used for healing, but John takes it one step further. In the New Jerusalem, the tree of life, the leaves are for the healing of the nations. No longer just for the chosen people, the Hebrew community. Now it's for everyone, from every nation in the world. And back in the first century, Rome was the superpower in the Mediterranean region, so everything revolved around them. Whatever benefited the Roman Empire, that was given priority. But God doesn't operate the way superpowers or even most nations today operate. The New Jerusalem has healing for all, for every nation. There are no second-class citizens in the eyes of God. All are equally loved, valued, and prioritized. Heather Murray Elkins is a retired United Methodist pastor. She's a seminary professor at the school I attended, Drew Theological School. She's a friend of mine and was my advisor as I was going through my 4 years there. In her book, The Holy Stuff of Life, Heather retells the story from a Bible study that she was leading at a conference with a group of women. And on this particular day, the Bible study was studying a story of the man who was possessed by demons that they called Legion. He had been stripped of his mind and his community. He frequently ran naked among the tombs on the outside of the town. And Jesus came clothed in righteousness of God, and he prevails over the demonic forces that seek to strip life from all its meaning. He restores the man to his right mind. The scripture says that the man even put on new clothes. And so Heather asked this group of women to think about those clothes and how, in order to make disciples, we must become involved in, well, she said, the fabric of other people's lives. So what does the clothing of the community of Jesus look like? Heather gave the class time to create images of what their rags of suffering would look like, and then tell stories of what they would wear if they could dress in garments of joy. One particular woman, always the best dressed in the group, listened carefully but said nothing. When the others brought up pictures to share, she stayed in her seat. And when the class was over, she waited until everyone was gone, and then she walked up and asked Heather, "Could I wear my clothes of suffering tomorrow?" Well, what do you say to that other than, yes, please? She was very eager to see how she would come dressed. And the next morning when class started, she was not there. But then she swept in, Heather says, literally swept into the room, and she was wearing a fine sheet, like toga style. Heather took her place with the rest of the class, eager to hear her story, and she told it without a trace of self-pity. She told it barefaced, standing there wearing nothing but a bedsheet. She said she was raised in foster care institutions, not because she had no parents, but because her mother didn't want her. She remembers being 4 years old and holding her mother's hand as they climbed the big gray steps and entered the long, dark hallway. She remembers crying herself to sleep at night and how the sheets smelled musty and strange. She remembers a visit when she was 9. Her mother is in the car, but she won't get out, and she tries to kiss her mother through a window that's only half rolled down. She clearly remembers being sent for when she's 14, for now her mother is living with a man who runs a restaurant, and they need a cheap waitress. She finds a man when she is 17 who is gentle. She trades the dirty aprons, the smelly towels, the smeared tablecloths for a simple wedding ring. He's an extremely kind man. They work hard together. They do well. She can afford nice things, and so she does. What she's never been able to figure out, though, until yesterday morning, she says, is why she's so addicted to sheets fine sheets, the highest thread count, Egyptian cotton, like top of the line sheets. She has closets and closets full of nothing but the best sheets. And now she knows what it means. Rags of suffering can't be transformed into garments of joy until they're washed in the blood of the Lamb. They can't get clean until they pass through the waters of baptism with Jesus. She then tells the story of Jesus using nothing but images of cloth. She tells it from the swaddling cloth of birth to the linen garments left in the empty tomb. She finishes and stands for a moment just looking at what she's wearing. She says, "She died and I never let it show. Maybe I can explain about these sheets to my pastor. Maybe he'll let me put one on the table when we have communion. Maybe he could even preach about forgiveness. Maybe I can feel more at home." On that first Easter, close to 2,000 years ago, the angels in bright, shining linen robes told the women that Jesus was not there, but he had risen. And ultimately, resurrection isn't just about one man walking out of a tomb. It's about God's plan to build a whole new world, one where everyone has a place and where all God's people are finally made completely whole the way God intended. The tree of life sits in the middle of this new Jerusalem. It's for the healing of the nations, all nations. This vision of what eternity will be like isn't just something that we have to look forward to down the road whenever it is that God calls us to go home. No, this is our homework assignment. As Dr. Boring puts it in his commentary, if this is where the world, under the sovereign grace of God, is going finally, then every thought, move, and deed in some other direction is out of step with reality. And finally, it's just wasted. Friends, this vision of the new Jerusalem is offered to us as an orientation for our life here and now. We must work for a world where everyone is included, where no one is outside God's love, grace, and forgiveness, where all can experience God's healing no matter what nation they're from, where justice and equality isn't just a pipe dream, but where God's all-encompassing love and power trumps any and every earthly authority, past, present, or future. This is the Easter message today. New life, healing, hope, and peace. That's what God intends for this world. And Jesus' resurrection embodied that. But until we reach the New Jerusalem, until we get to the end of all time, it's our job to live out the resurrection each and every day. May all of us be in step with the vision that God ultimately has for us all, not just today on Easter Sunday, but every day, as we, as part of Palmdale United Methodist Church, seek to be inspired by Jesus to love everyone, everywhere, and always.